Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex Podcast, the PGA edition. I am your host, Bryan. I'm always joined by Colin and Peter, aka CSU Ram 88. We're going to discuss the Dell Technologies Championship this week, but also recap a little bit of last week. We're in the midst of the FedEx Cup playoffs, and we've definitely seen some great plays so far. So definitely excited to jump into this pod. I usually kick to Colin right away, but I'm going to switch it up and kick to Pete, because Pete, I got to know your thoughts on DJ taking that line on the playoff and carrying it over the water. I mean, that's like the ultimate swag move.
Oh yeah, DJ with the total swag move and just with an epic finish. I actually needed Spieth, and normally I've I don't know. I've needed Spieth a couple times and been fading him a lot. It's scary when you're going up against Dustin Johnson, and wow, what a finish that he had, and it was a great tournament. I really enjoyed it. So it's fun to watch the best golfers in the world. A lot of those guys played really well. I thought the course was really challenging. I mean, watching these guys and how fast some of those putts were and where they needed to leave the ball in certain pins is really enjoyable. So excited for the FedEx to keep going. I advanced in the golf championship, so stoked. Nice. Going for another week. Although Molinari, that was my big disappointment. Mm-hmm. He ruined a great week. I only had one player miss the cut in my whole player pool. But unfortunately, I had Molinari on basically every team.
Yeah, that hurts for sure. But yeah, congrats on moving on. Colin, I know that you're not a golf watcher, but did you at least catch the highlights of anything? I mean, it was a pretty impressive
there's only one highlight, and that's the difference in the Pro Tracer line in terms of like Spieth versus DJ. My favorite is imposing DJ's line with the headline of U.S. response to North Korean missile test. Like that is just so appropriate. He's our country's greatest weapon. I'm inspired to like take that one perfect shot and play hero ball the next time I go out and just fail miserably. Like, I got 270 perfect line over water. Like, I'll take it. Pete probably has a lot more chances to reenact that shot because there's a lot more water on your home course. So I look forward to the inspiration that he's providing everybody and just all of us failing miserably. Pete actually might make it because he has a good drive. But, oh, man, that is – I feel like that shot is going to feed all of the worst impulses of all of the amateur golfers coming this weekend.
We'll dive into PGA. There's definitely a hole number 2 at my course, par 5, where there's water in front, behind, and to the right. So if you want to be stupid and go for it, which I haven't done, but maybe DJ will inspire me to grow some balls.
I think I only hit the water there to the front and to the back. Not the one to the right, but the year is still young. I have time to hit the trifecta.
Right. Oh, yeah.
So like Pete mentioned, there's all the best golfers definitely showed up last week, and definitely could be the same this week. The winner of the FedEx Cup playoffs wins $10 million. So these guys are definitely highly incentivized. We're moving to the Dell Technologies Championship, which takes place at TPC Boston. This tournament used to be the Deutsche Bank Championship, but it is now titled the Dell Technologies Championship, but it's still at the same course at TPC Boston. And it looks like we're going to have a lot of players playing well if you just sort by course-adjusted round score, which is our proprietary metric. Dustin Johnson, Jordan Spieth, Rory McIlroy, Jason Day all have the top scores at TPC Boston over the last 5 years. The next guys are Sergio and Matsuyama. So definitely the best players play well here, and I think we're going to be in store for yet another great week. Colin, I'll kick to you. What sort of players do well at TPC Boston other than the best players like I just mentioned?
This is a weird course in that there's pretty much zero course fit. And it's just more that all of the courses just played differently every year they've played in the last 5 years. 2014, it was a distance course. 2015, it was an accuracy course. If you just want to go last year, it's very faint on all things. The only thing that popped really is putting. So it's weird. Every single stat has popped at least positive or negative at least once in the last 5 years. So I'm actually not giving a whole lot of weight to course fit. There's definitely history here because, we do have at least a consistent track record. So maybe that gets history if you want to take the just the generic, all right, some people are just more comfortable here than others for some reason. Maybe gets a little bit more weight, but I'm struggling to find anything that really is more important than anything else. I just may fall back on history instead of fit this week.
Yeah, Pete, does that sort of go with what you know about TPC Boston? I know that you said that you've been before.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's fair. I maybe lean a little bit towards distance. There's, I think, 3 par 5s, and there are some long par 4s. But in general, I think Colin's right. I think I'm going to look a lot more at course history. The other thing, too, that you can look at is kind of guys who've done well historically in the FedEx. I know that's a little bit of that is totally narrative street, but I think there's some merit here, and there's obviously really big incentives. So someone like Paul Casey, I really like. He's played really well historically here, obviously, but also, a guy that seems to show up kind of in the FedEx Cup playoffs. So stuff like that is what I'm considering current form, and then obviously just trying to find mispriced guys. So I think it's a great week. We have a lot of great options and certainly some interesting pricing.
Just a broad question for you, Pete. The FedEx Cup playoffs, it does shrink every week. So there was 125 golfers last week, and then the top 100 in FedEx points are playing this week at the Dell Technologies. And then the final week in a couple of weeks will be the top 30. I assume that your strategy, both in cash games and GPPs, are going to change. Is that going to change this week, or is 100 still big enough where you're going to roll out your sort of similar strategy that you normally do?
I will have a similar strategy this week. I mean, I think you just have to go after the highest equity plays, or the plays that will be the most leveraged in tournaments. I don't think anything really changes. It goes from 100 to 70 this week, and then 70 to 30. So I feel pretty comfortable just kind of going after a similar strategy. I wouldn't see a reason to really deviate.
Even with the 30, or do you think, I guess we'll have to implement
once you get down to 30, I mean, it's going to be interesting. Obviously, a lot smaller field and a lot more opportunities to really be leveraged or contrarian, because certain guys will just be so heavily owned with only 30 golfers. But this week with 100, I think it's fine to.
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah, and we'll talk a little more about that in a couple of weeks, about leaving salary on the table, ways to be contrarian. But okay, so TPC Boston, it is par 71, playing at a little over 7,200 yards, so definitely skews a little more distance. But I agree with Colin that, both of you guys, that really going to favor the best golfers in the world, and these guys are playing really well right now. All right, so let's jump into the field here. The highest priced guy, we do have some really expensive players this week. Jordan Spieth is the highest priced guy at 12-1. DJ is right behind him at 12K. But then there is a drop-off to the next tier of guys. Rahm, 10-6, JT, 10-3, Matsuyama, 10-1. Colin, I'll kick to you first. In these loaded fields, whether they're majors or World Golf Classics or FedEx or whatever, we usually don't have it's almost like Spieth and DJ are in a tier of their own, which we haven't seen normally. What are your thoughts on just the big gap between them and the rest of the field?
Short answer is I basically agree with the gap. Their margin last week was pretty convincing enough. We're always hounding on margin of victory and how winning by 6 strokes or 10 strokes, whatever, should put you in a class above the rest. And that's basically what they did last week. And so I basically agree with their pricing. I have them both significantly ahead of the rest of the field. I have Spieth a little bit higher than DJ still, only because their last 2 results are indistinct. I mean, their finishes are basically indistinguishable, save for a tiebreaker.
So do you think DJ is back? We've talked about since the Masters, he's had some. He was shaky for a while, but it was last week, and I guess over the last couple of weeks, the form. Are you ready to put him back in the top tier here?
Yeah, absolutely. He's shown enough to deserve his pricing for sure. And that will be interesting because normally, like you said, you don't usually get 2 12K guys in a field. And that should do interesting things for ownership. It's a really either because obviously you can't fit both of them in there. I think it may be mathematically impossible to get both 12K guys in there. So it's definitely going to split ownership. I don't know. They're both still going to think I'd be pretty high owned because they are the class of the field. But I have them about dead even, and I think that kind of gap in pricing is in fact deserved for given how well both of them are playing right now.
Yeah, Pete, what are your thoughts on the gap between DJ and Spieth and the rest of the field? It does. I think it's certainly going to affect ownership and also just the way that you have to build your rosters.
I think DJ is going to be the chalk of the high end guys at this point. I think everyone just saw what we saw in the beginning of the year last week. His distance is just so dominating, and he's really just crushing the ball off the tee, which gives him a huge advantage. So I do think that DJ's price is warranted, and I think he'll end up being a pretty popular play. I think Spieth obviously played exceptionally well too, but the other thing that you have to look at with these high-end guys is just the history. And, there's guys that have great course-adjusted round led by Dustin Johnson, right behind him, Jordan Spieth, and then right behind him, Rory McIlroy. So you have the class of the field having great history here too. So I do think people will try to go stars and scrubs this week, and I think the pricing is pretty spot on. I think DJ might I could see an argument for having Dustin Johnson more expensive. I think he's going to end up being a bigger favorite, but it's within $100, so it makes sense to me.
Yeah, Pete, let's jump down a little bit to these guys right below them, because it is interesting that, we usually have these top guys, Spieth, DJ, and then we usually throw, Rory and, Matsuyama's been up there lately. Those are sort of the elite guys, but we actually have Rahm and JT that are above them. And Rory is maybe the most interesting guy in the field, as he sometimes is. He's been really bad of late, minus 15.75 DraftKings plus minus over his last 10 events. He's only exceeded value in 30% of those, so just 3 of the 10. But if you just look at his history here at TPC Boston, he won last year, came in 5th in 2014, and then won it back in 2012. So if you're just looking at a 5-year window, Rory plays as TPC Boston as well as anyone. And he's only 9.8, but I think people were let down with him. He had the elite history at Quail Hollow, and he let down. What are your thoughts on Rory? And is he going to be a contrarian play?
I don't think Rory will ever really be that contrarian because of the name and obviously the upside that he possesses, but he's clearly still bothered by this injury. He says he's trying to manage it even last week. So obviously he's trying to play well. I think he's, swinging pretty free, knowing he can't really get hurt worse, but he's also, not practicing as much. He's not getting in. He's not grinding out a swing just because of making sure he wants to heal properly and be an A+ for the majors next year. So I think there's definitely a risk with Rory. I think that's something that you're dealing with. If he started off really poorly, I could see him withdrawing potentially. It's obviously small, but that's what you're dealing with Rory. I think Ricky Fowler right below him and might end up being a pretty popular chalk option. I'm also really high on Paul Casey, who I'll be curious to see his ownership at 8,900. So this range below Spieth and DJ, there's a lot of interesting options. I still will be playing a good bit of Jon Rahm in tournaments. I'm just trying to buy Jon Rahm while he's not the top golfer. So but that's kind of the way I'm looking at it. Matsuyama's dip in price is pretty massive as well. Obviously, it was a really bad week last week, missing the cut with some really bad putting. But Colin, what are your thoughts on the guys below Spieth and DJ and Rory in particular, I guess?
Yeah, it's interesting to see Rory below 10K, but also not totally unexpected. I know my beat on him pretty much all year is his volume metrics and how recently he played. By proxy, basically guessed he's injured. That seemed to play out pretty well because he has been injured, so he's always been docked. Now that the major events have kind of forced him out of the field, because even if he's not 100%, he'll still play. His actual play has kind of taken over those proxy measures for is he injured or not, and his actual play reflects injury. So I agree with that 9,800, but I also agree with Pete that he's such a household name that people will probably just jump to see Rory at 10K. Or below 10K, and his ownership is going to be pretty high as a result because people aren't necessarily following his kind of injury status. Combine that with the fact that he has really good history here, and I think it's a fade just off of ownership alone, but I do think the pricing is about right. I have Paul Casey as the highest owned golfer in the field right now, or projected highest owned. I think, yeah, he is also probably the best value here. Great history to boot, under 9K. I think he's going to be massively popular. Whether or not it's enough equity to play him anyway, I mean, I don't think so. Golf's pretty random. I understand if you want to make a case for him. But yeah, I think I agree. Ricky's also going to be pretty popular. I think his bad history here, one of the few top players that has just straight up bad history, makes him a fade on that end. The guys that I'm interested in that are kind of hovering at in particular, someone I think a lot of people are going to gloss right over is Louis Oosthuizen, who's done nothing so far this year. And like people are just going to probably gloss over that 9,100 price tag. There's going to be like people are going to.
Hey, wait, he got second. He got second recently. Louis did.
Okay, I missed a single result.
Second in the PGA Championship. Come on.
Yeah, all right. That one is fair, but I think people are not used to paying 9,100 for him at the very least. It's not
He's
a price
leverage for sure. Paul Casey will be high owned. He's leverage for sure.
Yeah, like I think people are going to prefer massively Paul Casey to Oosthuizen. Oosthuizen, by my measure, has the best history here relative to his ability. I think it's a pretty good leverage pivot. So that's probably my favorite ownership play.
One guy I like, but I'm curious your thoughts on his ownership, both of you. Jason Day, he's at 9.5. I've really liked his form. If you just look back over the last couple of weeks, he's got 6th last week in the Northern Trust, 9th at the PGA Championship. And in particular, the things that really make him Jason Day, the elite putting has seemed to be back. It seems to be playing really well. He is ranked pretty highly in total strokes gained of late, and he does have really good course history here at TPC Boston. He's been in the top 15 each of the last 4 years. He was 51st back in 2012, but then a 3rd place and a 2nd place finish going back to 11 and 10. I know those are a little bit out of our data window here, but elite or really good history here at TPC Boston, and seems to be rounding back in form in a way that people aren't quite noticing. At 95, I really like him as a GPP play. What are your thoughts on Day, Pete?
Well, he's been a popular guy to be talked about on Twitter recently. A lot of sharp guys talking about how Day is trending in the right direction with strokes gained, also on his approach. And just from watching with the eye test, he's definitely playing better. I've worried about his back, just the way he's been moving, but he definitely seems like he's finding his groove. And the one thing with all these guys, in other tournaments and other situations, they're going to – I don't know if they're – outside of majors, obviously, where they're really trying to peak and be dialed in. This is the biggest thing for them to chase. I mean, $10 million is a massive incentive. So I think that, someone like Jason Day is trying to find his form. It's great momentum for the next season. So I really do like Jason Day quite a bit at that price tag. I think he's another interesting way to go. I think that whole range of guys below Dustin and Spieth will be really interesting in terms of ownership. I think Louis, like Colin just mentioned, will definitely be the lowest owned, but it's an interesting compromise of equity. For cash games, someone like Kuchar's playing unbelievable right now. Brooks Koepka's price has really come down after all the major success and the success he's had in big events. So this top end range is really interesting, and that's good. This is why fantasy golf is so fun this time of year.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So let's dip down to the mid-tier range. Let's go, guys, in the 8K range. We can include, I think, one guy who is going to be interesting for sure at the 7.9 range, which is Adam Scott. He has a really, obviously, great long-term adjusted round score of 68.6, and at 7.9, that's quite cheap for him. But really, yeah, this whole range just includes guys who is probably surprises you with how cheap they are. Brooks Koepka, like Pete mentioned, is only 8.7. Adam Scott's at 7.9. But even Sergio Garcia, after being over 10,000 for the British Open and expensive last week, is now down at 8.4. I know that there's probably decent reasons for that. He's been struggling a little bit over his last couple tournaments. But 8.4 is a really, really low price for Sergio. Colin, what are your thoughts on ownership in this range? It seems like this is a really good range for cash game plays.
Yeah, I think there are a couple names. I think Sergio or Adam Scott is probably going to be the highest or one of the highest owned in this range just because, it's Adam Scott. People are used to a lot more caliber for him. And, can he really be playing poorly enough to play 7,900? I think the answer is yes. I think that price is about fair. Just really since the U.S. Open, there's just been nothing in the results log to suggest that he should be higher than 8K. All of his 8K finishes are just, the miscut's pretty bad. 61 at PGA is pretty bad, and just not a whole lot else to show because he hasn't played recently. I think it's a pretty easy pivot off of him, just given how popular I think it's going to be. As far as the rest of the range, I think the real shot, the one I have to talk about is Justin Rose at 8,100 because I think people have kind of a similar why is it so low? I basically agree with that. It is just straight up the worst course history in the whole field. That's depressing the price. Plus, He's been disappointing at majors lately, so I basically agree with that price. I'd much rather prefer someone like maybe like a Kevin Chappell or a Charlie Hoffman, who are definitely going to be lower owned and have the history here to back up those prices. I'm not sure how closely like their history will affect ownership. I don't think it'll be a whole lot, but yeah, anything from like a Kevin, like Chappell, Hoffman, and even arguably Webb Simpson, just on ownership alone, like will probably be my favorite. Trying to get some leverage here.
Yeah, and even guys like Cooch. I mean, Matt Kuchar over his last 10 tournaments, a plus 16.99 DraftKings plus minus. He's hit value 80% of the time during that span. So if you've had Cooch in cash games, you've probably been doing pretty well. Pete, what are your thoughts on this range? Definitely a lot of really intriguing guys, just given their price and talent level.
Rose and Scott stand out from name recognition, long-term adjusted round, but I think there's merit given kind of how their current form is, and obviously have the course history angle as well. I like Daniel Berger quite a bit, 7,600. He's someone I'm just going to continue to buy. I think he's really talented. It was cool to see Spieth kind of bounce back not bounce back even, but I think there's a nice little synergy going with Justin Thomas, Berger, Spieth, that crew of friends. They're definitely, kind of getting the competitive juices going against each other. And I think Daniel Berger obviously hasn't achieved like those guys, but certainly a really talented athlete. So I'm buying him while he's low. The one guy I really love, who's I guess the very low end, maybe the high end of the next tier, is Patrick Cantlay. I think he's a guy that I think he's really, really good. Just from everything I've seen. Obviously had, really high status as an amateur before some crazy injuries and other things. But now he's back and he's playing great. So I'm really high on him. I think he's someone that's a really great option. I'll be curious to see his ownership. Colin, what are your thoughts on him?
I mean, he's the one I reserve judgment for all the time because, he's so new and I just like hemmed and hawed and went inconclusive. But now that there's enough data in the system, I think he is the clear-cut highest value in the field. Not even it's still even the reason that I'd be particularly high on him here is to get a golfer style play, you usually also need a little bit more data instead of just raw results. And there's not enough here for me to I don't have enough to say what his style is from the data perspective alone. But at a course like Boston, where there isn't a great fit to begin with, it almost doesn't matter if I know what Cantley's style is. So that's a good point. I would be bullish on him. Yeah. And I think he will be definitely the highest owned of the sub 75 crowd. Maybe Adam Scott will have him beat out slightly. It's arguably enough value where I'm insensitive to his ownership and just such a clear cut above the rest of the field.
You think he'll be above Finau?
I'll take Cantlay heads up over Finau a million times over this week. Finau has pretty bad history here.
Yeah, Finau and Molinari definitely stand out as guys that are typically pretty popular in low. Yeah, I'm interested. What would we put a lot Cantlay? We talked about him last week. It was a guy that we definitely talked on the pod for a while. I wrote him up in my breakdown as well. So it's not like we missed him, but he was still pretty low owned. In the dog leg, he was 8%. He was below 10% in every tournament on DraftKings. So it's not like, us talking about him got him chalk. He did finish in 10th place last week. So maybe people are going to start to turn on him. But what would you put his over under ownership line, Pete?
15. What do you think, Colin?
I'd still say 18. I'll take over 15. We're not that far off, but I think over 15 for sure.
Okay.
All right. So not bad enough where you have to he's an auto fade. You're still getting some decent value here.
No.
Equity wise, yeah.
I think he only becomes auto fade around 30% and maybe not even then.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's talk about some of these other value guys sort of below that Adam Scott range at 7.9. We just mentioned, but 71 Finau, and then Molinari at 6.9, definitely a guy who has a really good adjusted round score, 68.7 long term compared to his price is going to be really strong. obviously missed a cut last week, as Pete mentioned, but he's coming off a second place finish as well in the PGA Championship, tied with Louis that we discussed, who is, in the 9K range. So definitely going to be interesting. Pete, are you going to go back to Molinari, or is he burned you?
I'm tempted to. I don't know what Colin would think. I mean, I still like him as a golfer, but last week was tilting. I don't know. I still need to do a little more research. He stands out to me when I just first made a lineup, but he stands out to me quite a bit. There's a lot of guys that I've rostered a lot in the same price range. I feel like Brendan Steele, Luke List. You got all my guys kind of in this range. Even Emiliano Grillo, who I was high on this time last year. So there's interesting guys. Even someone else coming up like Xander, who I think is interesting in the low this range at 6,900. He's had some good form. Did miss the cut at the PGA Championship, but he's an intriguing option. Hudson Swafford, just 100 cheaper too. So there's a lot of guys that I think you can get low owned here. In terms of guys who I think will end up being popular, I'm struggling a little bit in terms of who I think will just be like mega chalk in the low range. I've seen more sharps on Kevin Na recently. I'm not sure if that'll come to fruition this week. Gary Woodland just burned people. Obviously, he's a little bit more expensive, but Colin, what are your thoughts on like the low end range? Finau and Molinari stand out just from name recognition to me, but in terms of identifying the chalk, anyone stand out a lot to you?
I think Finau, just on prior ownership and popularity alone, is going to be pretty popular. I think it's pretty good value. Like, it's not great history, but I think definitely one of the top tier value plays on the board. Right next to him is, in fact, Francesco Molinari. This is a classic case. I think you talked me out of like the same spot earlier this year with Martin Laird, where yes, it's tilting when someone burns you, and like especially like week over week. But like the more contrarian thing is like you have to recognize that it's opportunity, right? Everyone else will be off of them. Ownership will be down. Unless, I mean, like, I always assume that there's no like long-term systematic problem. People can have a bad week every once in a while. I think Molinari is just swallow the pill and bite the bullet and reload on again. I think that's just a classic, like, pick your low ownership spot.
Yeah.
The one name, like, down in the mid-sevens we haven't talked about yet, on ownership alone, I think is going to be fantastic. Fantastic history. Like, no one likes him. All of our favorites, Keegan Bradley. I think he'll definitely be under like 10% for sure. Pete, you have a lot more insight in this. Keegan like pops into the Thunderdome disproportionately, way more, I swear, than any other golfer relative to like the dog leg. What is that? What's driving that? Because I know it's not your entries driving it up. So
it's not my entries. There's a couple guys who like him. I mean, you kind of know it's a lot of these guys.
Do you know the thought process? I mean, like, have you talked about it, or like, what's the like?
I don't get it. I mean, you know how bearish I am on Keegan in most of the time. He is starting to play better, and I think that there's probably some historic stuff that when he was playing well, people might go to. But in general, I don't get it. I just am not a huge Keegan fan.
Would you just not even at how low would Keegan's ownership be for you to consider him this week, or have to consider?
Like in the dog leg.
Sub 4%, something like that. Maybe. I mean, I've actually played Keegan like once or twice this year, and there's been spots where he's kind of popped up. I think also one thing that's definitely driving it is just like his matchups. His odds are important, but like matchup odds certainly have been all right for Keegan in certain spots. So it's a driver that I'm sure a lot of these guys are looking at, and could be a tiebreaker or decision maker for some people. So sub 5%, I'd consider him, I guess. You like him?
Yeah, I think he is like decent equity here. Nothing great, like nothing compared to like Cantlay. But I do think his ownership will be like, I have it right around 6% right now. Like close. Him and Molinari, I think, are going to be definitely sub 10%. Which is going to help a lot of people. I think I agree.
I would just take Ches Reavie because I love Ches Reavie instead of Keegan Bradley right here, and I definitely would take Daniel Berger over Keegan Bradley straight up.
Yeah, where's Berger? Berger's like these. I think Berger will probably
the same price.
Yeah, so it's like, what's the ownership difference where you think Bradley offers sufficient leverage over Berger, depending on how popular you think Berger will be?
That's a great question. I mean, I just don't think Berger will be that popular. I think the really low owned guy out of this group is going to be Ches Reavie, and you also like Russell Henley last week. I mean, he's the same price too.
Yeah, like Henley is definitely. I think Henley and Keegan Bradley offer like really great. They're really similar in terms of leverage they provide, like at the same price as well. I think Gary Woodland is arguably right in the same spot. Like I think that's a case of like, all right, if he's burned people, that's fine. Keep his ownership down. He does have the history here to back it up. And if there's ever a spot where people can like get right back on the train, it's gonna be great. I get why people have been touting Na and been on him lately, but like this is the wrong course to do it. Just look at the results. It's a garbage fire across the board.
Good. I don't like Kevin Na. I don't play him that often, but
Yeah, like
I should say I don't like him. I know some people can't stand him for the historic slow play and all that stuff, but he's a member at Southern Highlands. I play out there. He's a good dude. He's a stud, but
obviously I have no problem with slow play that requires you to watch golf in order to get frustrated with him taking up TV time. So
yeah. The waggle issue for Kevin Na is just ridiculous. But this range is just interesting. I think a lot of people will be attracted to Justin Rose, Adam Scott, just these names that seem way too cheap from name recognition. And there's definitely going to be some opportunity with some of these guys who are playing well that are priced more expensive than they have been historically, and kind of finding the leverage spots. This is definitely where to do it. And in the really low end range, there's definitely a lot of opportunity. I don't think many guys like 7K and below are going to be 15% owned.
Yeah, it definitely does seem that maybe ownership's going to be pretty distributed among the low end just because there's not guys that stand out. So I guess that means that most lineups are probably going to be balanced. Pete, you think that's true? Like because of these guys in the 8K range, so maybe the contrarian lineup construction is going to be stars and scrubs.
I think that there will be that to a degree. I still think people really want to get DJ and Spieth in this week. I think the trend for both those guys is really high, and people are just trying to roster them. So I do expect to see quite a bit of both of those golfers, but the challenge is there's not, slam dunk low cheap guys that people can just jam in. But we'll see. We'll see what transpires.
Yeah, for sure. One last question. You mentioned the matchups market. Is that something, Pete, that you look at every week, or do you look at it with bigger tournaments like majors, or is it a sort of an every week process for you to just glance at the matchups and see if anyone is a strong favorite over someone, if that maybe changes the equity value for you?
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get as much information I can on the market and where things are moving and where people are, who are the favorites. So that's a part of my process every week for sure.
Colin, is that something that you use personally when you're building lineups? I know we have like the odds to win the tournament in player models, but do you look at some of these props and matchup stuff as well?
No, I think that I'm pretty comfortable with kind of like massaging the data into generating my own matchups and kind of like ascertaining where everyone's at. I think matchups are great. Like they're definitely great if you're trying to gauge equity because, that's like you don't have to do any heavy number crunching. As far as how matchups influence ownership versus odds, I would guess it's still odds that drive ownership. I think it's the most prominent thing.
It's probably only high stakes, right?
Yeah, I think in Thunderdome it's way different, or I think matchups probably drive ownership a lot more. But like in the dog leg, like I would guess futures still drive ownership more than matchups. Pete, do you agree or disagree with that statement?
I agree with all that.
Okay, just curious.
Yeah, definitely something to think about that I think maybe a casual player doesn't even think to look at is matchups and how that would affect. And you're right, it may not have a big ownership effect on the lower stakes, but if you're trying to look at our ownership dashboard and you're trying to align yourselves with sharp players, it's good to pay attention to what sharp players are paying attention to, and definitely something to think about. I always ask this question: who is your favorite golfer who you think could be 5% owned or less? Colin, I'll kick to you first one on this one.
Let's go back to the classics and let's play the hits, Hudson Swafford. I think that's going to be like definitely below 2%. Has the history to boot. Good enough history. 2%. Ship it.
Yeah, good go, Pete.
I was looking at the hits too between Steele, Griot. I'm just checking a couple things here real quick. I'll go Brendan Steele as a guy that, going right back to the hits. I think I like Ches Reavie too because I just think he's in that price range where no one's going to play him and he's playing well. It's not necessarily the best course, but I'll go Brendan Steele.
Yeah, that's a good call. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a bunch of. I mean, all of these guys in the sort of lower 7K, high 6K ranges. I mean, there's guys like Mark Leishman that we haven't even discussed, who has a really good, adjusted round score. Harold Varner is a guy that I've seen some sharp people be a little more on recently.
He's trending. He might end up being a little bit more owned, but I could be wrong on that. I wouldn't be surprised to see him gain some momentum in terms of ownership as the week goes on.
Yeah, he's a 0 to 1% in our models right now, projected ownership. Obviously, we don't have sort of the top recommendations.
Leishman will be the most chalk of this group, I think.
More than Molinari, same price, I believe, right?
Yeah, I guess it'll be really close. Leishman always garners a good bit of ownership. He missed the cut with a bogey on 18 last week, but I think he'll be a pretty popular play at this price.
Yeah, that's definitely fair. Okay, let's pick some winners here, and then we'll get out of here. So we'll go guys 9K and above, so Louis and up, and then we'll go below that as well.
I'll volunteer for the dreaded third spot here.
All right, I'll go first. I don't think I've had to go first in a while, so PE, it'll get second pick. Yeah, I mean, the equity play is definitely DJ and Spieth, but just to be, no, I'm not going to do. Yeah, I'm going Jason Day.
Perfect. I'll take DJ.
Yeah,
run a third spot and yield Spieth for him.
Yeah, like it's just that was not how I expected that to go at all.
Who are you going to pick third if DJ and Spieth went?
Rahm.
I like the conviction behind the day pick. I like that.
You got to go with who you believe. So
yeah. All right. What's my
under 8K?
Under 8K. All right. So that takes out Paul Casey. All right. Let's go rookie phenom, shocks the world, unintimidated. Patrick Cantlay.
Give me Daniel Berger.
I like it. Yeah, Berger's a great pick there. So I guess I can go a little bit chalky here, and I'll go Adam Scott. We'll end it there. Jason Day.
You got some nice plays there. The Australians, Adam Scott and Jason Day. It's pretty nice.
Yeah. I mean, Jason Day definitely wasn't the equity pick, but I do really think that he's trending in the right direction. And it's not like we're like holding these picks against each other, so why not be a little contrarian with it?
I like it. It's fun.
Yeah. All right, cool. We'll end it there. Good luck this week, guys. Dell Technologies. Good luck in tournaments. Hope to see you guys at the top of leaderboards. We'll talk to you guys next week.